Good evening, Andy and Michelle. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing well, thank you.
Very good.
Hi.
Everybody ready for the cold snap?
Yes.
Me too.
Well, 60 degrees is
Well, I
not,
know.
Cold.
really a cold snap, but yeah,
Yeah, I know, but it's not 98 degrees anymore.
that's true. That's absolutely
So.
true.
Oh, my background came off. I wonder why. Oh, well, now you get to see my messy house.
No, all we can see is your blinds. It's okay.
Yeah. So Brian will mention this tonight, but we've received, I think, 4 chapters. And I will get those sent out tomorrow for the October 4th. Yeah, he can say, but anyway, so you'll have plenty of time to review it, hopefully, before the next meeting.
Okay.
But oh, there we go. There we go.
Oh, is that somewhere back east?
That is Booth Bay. Well, no, I take that back. That's Kennebunkport, Maine. So yes.
Okay. Home to the bushes.
Yes. I grew up about 6 hours north of there.
Really?
I did. I grew up in Maine
Well,
until I got married and we moved out here.
well,
So,
you might want to go back. I'm sure there's a lot fewer people there than there are here.
oh, I've become a city girl.
Okay.
I don't think I could live back in the rural northern Maine. Yeah. I definitely have become a city girl. I do miss the water now. I could, live in like the Boston suburbs or something like that, or in Portland, Maine, smaller city, be closer to the water. But then, you gotta have here I am complaining about 98-degree weather and, it's very, very cold back there in the winter and very humid. So I'll take the 98-degree weather in Colorado dry.
Right. Well, and I love where I live because I'm a subscriber for the DCPA Broadway series.
Oh,
and
yeah, exactly.
and I go to a lot of concerts, and I thank you, Dad. I have 2 season football tickets to the
Oh,
Broncos.
wow.
Well, again, thank you, Dad. I wish he would have gotten more, but so I've been thinking about how my lawn is way too big for me. And I'm just like, but I don't want to move away from where I am because I'm in a nice spot. It's nice and green. I can get downtown. I can get to the football games.
Right.
I can get everywhere I want to go. So I'm actually waiting to see if something comes on the market over in Kent Village. So I can stay in Inglewood and
Right.
stay in a ranch. And but just have a much smaller yard that the HOA mostly takes care of. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so
I gotcha.
yeah, we'll see. The top of the market, I think, hit over there. The last one that was on the market, it was, I think, right around $1 million. And
Wow.
oh yeah, I bet even my little house here, my little 1,200 square foot house, since I'm in the part of Inglewood that can go to Cherry Creek schools.
Right.
There's nothing in my block, even the ones that are just, nothing in these blocks up here, even ones that have had nothing done to them like my house, they don't sell for less than 750. I mean,
Right.
just because of the school district.
Right,
So,
exactly. So is that the neighborhood with council member Russell and Olson in that area? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I couldn't remember if that was Hampton Hills or if that was Kent Village. So
yeah, no, it's Hampton Hills.
oh, it is Hampton Hills.
Yeah, it is Hampton Hills, but Hampton Hills starts at, well, I'm on Williams. Next street east is what? Reyes? higher race. Anyway, that's where Hampton Hills stops. And I'm
Oh,
actually
okay.
in what's called Stetler Twining subdivision because my backyard kitty corner neighbor was Clark Stetler, who
Oh,
was
okay.
the very first superintendent for Cherry Creek Schools.
Oh, wow.
So he put my neighborhood from the east side of Gilpin to University, Dartmouth to Hampton in the Cherry Creek School District. All Clark Stetler did that on his own.
Wow.
Thank you, Clark.
okay.
Thank you, Clark.
Good
Especially-
evening, Chris. I gotta get a notebook. Good evening, Chris. Hey, Christine.
Hello.
Hey,
Hey, Brian.
where's your background, Nancy?
That's Kennebunkport, Maine.
Oh, beautiful.
Yes, it is. Very much so. Yep. How have you been, Christine? I haven't seen you for a bit.
No kidding. Great.
Hey, Suzanne, she's connecting. Hi, Suzanne.
Hi there.
Hey, Colin.
Hello. How's everyone doing?
Good, and you?
Good.
Very good.
Do you think it's always funny that different programs, the cameras seem completely different where they point at? So it feels like that.
Good evening, Kate.
Good evening.
Kate, your hair looks fantastic.
I got it done last night, so thank you for noticing.
You're welcome. I thought, you looked a little bit, it's a little bit different color, but a little bit like Kate Middleton's hair. So
Well, thank you for the compliment. I will
you're
take
welcome. When you have curly hair like mine, your hair is the same every day unless you straighten it. So, and I don't want to take the time to do that.
Your hair always looks beautiful. You have great curls.
Thank you. They are what they are.
I don't think you complimented me on my hair.
You look debonair and a little shiny too at the same time, Colin.
Oh, Michelle.
No, it's fine. It's good. It's nice and clean. No,
I am always a little bit shiny, especially in this room with the lighting. It's the only way to get to see my lovely face also.
Good evening, Kate Townley. How are you?
she's coming.
She is. Oh, why is she not allowed to unmute?
gonna make a joke there, but
Yeah.
Since she can't reply, that'd be unfair, right?
I do know Noel will not be here. He's traveling. Hmm. Colin, do you have any ideas or anyone else? There she is.
Oh.
There you are. Very
I
good.
guess I needed to accept that it was being recorded.
Oh, okay. Well, we are glad you're here.
So I guess we can go ahead and get started. This week, what we have for you all is another presentation from Chris. This one will have some updates on our technical advisory committee meetings, as well as I think some follow-ups on your recent meetings, and then kind of a schedule of where we're going from here. So with that, I'll just let Chris take it away.
All right, thank you, Brian. Good evening, everyone. Share my screen here. Okay. All right, does everyone have the title slide?
Yep.
And let me know if this isn't advancing, because sometimes I've had trouble with this. Do you now have the schedule?
no, still looking steering. Yeah,
Okay,
There we go.
there it goes.
now schedule, okay. So we've seen this a number of times. This is just to let you know we're transitioning from framework into initial drafts and eventually recommended drafts. And you can see it's a pretty compressed time frame for September and October. So that's by way of preview of what we're going to discuss at the end of this meeting. Again, all of this is, let me get to the next slide.
Can
Yeah,
you get rid of the stuff on the left-hand side?
Yeah, that's what I
so
was
that it's
hoping
bigger
hoping
for
to
us
do.
to see?
I think when I was running presentation, it did
Yeah,
that.
that's
Is that
better.
a little better?
Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
for some reason, it's only working in my share screen mode and not the full slide mode. So I'm apologize, it's a bit clunky. I'm at my office and we have multiple screens and I haven't mastered the sharing. This is just a reminder of our engagement strategy, and we're kind of, transitioning from listening to you all to the options to figuring out our route and what we're doing. So we're really focusing here on getting the draft language in front of you. And so that'll be coming soon. As Brian mentioned, we've had we're just winding up our technical committee meetings. We had the sustainability one a little over a week ago. And so that took us really from July through September, actually. We had hoped to wind up by September, but that last one was landing on the holiday weekend. And so we bumped it to a week ago Friday. So just to update you on those, the way those meetings were translating to the framework of the development code are here. The first one on July 29th, we discussed procedures and technical provisions. Essentially what came out of those meetings were improving pre-application steps and also giving staff more flexibility on determining when, where, and how to establish those pre-application meetings. Mainly one of the big things that came out was the ability to cut someone off if they're kind of on a fishing expedition and not formalizing an application, but seeking around, but not for approvals, assurances, but not sure what they're going to do. And then the other part was establishing better provisions for notice neighborhood meetings and giving some flexibility for when, where, and how those occur as well, based on the scale and extent of the application. A big part of cleaning up the procedures was removing administrative and operating procedures and permitting issues that are in the code right now, and making sure it's focusing on planning and zoning development reviews. Not that those other things aren't important, but they're integrated and incorporated in there by reference in a lot of places, and they don't necessarily need to be codified. Things like steps to get to a permit that maybe certain departments have procedures and submittals that we didn't want to codify, things that were already in the building code that we don't want to codify as well. And so keeping it a little more clean and focused on the development review of the development code. In that regard, distinguishing the types of review. We think of it, and it's not quite as neat as the 3 bullet points that are on there, you know, administrative, discretionary, and legislative, but that's an easy way to think of it, that generally when decisions are going to the planning commission, they're either discretionary and guided by the code if you make the final decision like you do on a conditional use permit, or they're advisory where you're passing on a recommendation to the council, and then the council and BZA obviously serving in the final decision-making authority in a lot of places. Then the last part about procedures is improving the decision-making criteria. So hopefully that helps you all too, that those of you that are on the planning commission, but building expectations is important, but then also you'll see a lot of language that aligns it with the policies and intent statements, some of the things we've been discussing throughout this process. So the next meeting, we got into streets and public realm design on August 5th. I think we provided you a summary of that fresh after that meeting, but a lot of that's now been translated into the draft code. Essentially where we ended up was adding some different street design types for specific streets in specific contexts, improving the landscape, sidewalk, bicycle facilities, parking facilities, lane widths. If you recall, or we discussed with this group, they're currently just right-of-way widths and street widths. So we're adding some details to those types of things, but also maintaining some of the current street provisions for standard applications, but trying to better identify where certain street designs should be pursued versus others based on the development context. With that, a large part of our conversation, both with you all and with the technical committee, was we need to be careful of thinking that one street section is the answer, and you have a wide variety of conditions throughout the city, both in terms of the context and street and right-of-way widths, and we want to be building towards decisions that may not involve complete street design, may be dealing with situations of doing the best with what you can. So all of those elements that are in the first bullet point also include some guiding criteria on how you balance those with other competing issues in the right of way, how you might balance those with constraints in the right of way. So pay attention to that provision. That's why it's in there, is to deal with the practical realities that staff has to deal with on a day-to-day with streets. Open space, the main idea here, we're rolling in your current open space dedication standard. There were some members of the technical committee that had some insights onto, it's still, even though you don't get a lot of open space dedicated, being a built out community, and also those types of spaces, usually the city's policies desire bigger or larger parks, but that with the fee in lieu is still an important part of the development application process. So we built the coordination of different types of spaces around that fundamental, that we wanted to keep the current open space dedication and fee in lieu standards, and then add in how to basically build a better system of different types of spaces, both public, common, and private, and then various types from large scale to small scale, and kind of creating that system of civic spaces rather than just a space for the sake of space standard. And then lastly, in coordination with all of that, with mobility, access, and public realm design, we got into some of the parking and access standards and EV provisions. Essentially where we ended up was, we do want easier, better criteria for flexibility in parking. The current alternative parking plans were a bit cumbersome for staff to deal with and a little bit uncomfortable to make decisions under. But we also need to be careful that, don't go overboard. It's a similar theme that we heard from the public of don't force change that we're not ready for. We were made aware of some existing parking problems out there. And so there's some serious concern about eliminating or reducing parking too much and causing more of those problems. So making sure that when they do exist, we know how to manage them is I think where we ended up. And then on the EV parking, tracking with other policy initiatives, there's a lot of discussions going on with other groups and committees on that. And so this is, I guess, a good place to point out, I should have done this at the beginning, the drafts, you're going to see some of these things that the technical committee has discussed. We haven't landed on a final direction yet. So the drafts are obviously still subject to comment direction from you all, but there's also things in here that we're trying to float out to see where the city wants to be, and either dial things up or dial things down based on that. And I think the EV parking one is an example of that. So we want to coordinate and track with some of those other policy discussions as the draft goes through reviews.
Chris,
Yes.
will we know, I think Nancy said that you've got the first 4 chapters or something ready to.
Yeah,
give to us.
just a little bit of a sneak peek ahead when we get to the schedule. We plan to discuss those with you all on the October 4th meeting, and you should be getting those really shortly because we wanted to, our original schedule said we were having some of those come to you for this meeting. We realized we were kind of crunching up on a deadline where you wouldn't have had time to review it. So you should be getting those 4 chapters really shortly. And so some of these things I'm highlighting are more of be aware of, heads up to what to look for this, and also spurring any other thoughts or questions you might have. But there's a slide that kind of outlines that a little bit more of when you'll get things and what meetings we'll discuss them at.
Okay, well, my question is though, you just said that some of these things, in particular with the parking and things like that, you know that this draft that we're going to get has language that's not finalized yet. Will we be able to tell which sections those are?
Oh, I see. Yeah, good question. Not necessarily. In most cases, I did try to flag them with our own internal notes. And so if it was a big picture item, I would do that. I would put a drafting note to the side so it would pop up if you're familiar with Word, you can highlight things and comment. And so there will be some of those in there, and it usually should highlight the bigger picture ones. And then these drafts will also be accompanied by what we call section maps that also provide some of that editorial comments. And so in that document, I'll flag things that maybe aren't necessarily resolved yet or that we need further direction on. So I think most of them should be caught, but there may, there's things that we may think we've resolved and we get comments back that it's not resolved. So there's that issue too. But yeah, to your original question, I did try to highlight those as much as possible.
Okay, well, and access and parking aren't until chapter 7 anyway, so we're good for now. So
yes, well, you will see those in the first round because we're going to hit 1, 2, 3, and 7. Yeah, so you'll get those right away. Yeah, we tried to coordinate since your current standards have access and circulation kind of blended at both large scale and site scale. We tried to coordinate those because there's some corresponding changes in each of those chapters.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
And then just so everyone knows, those will go out either this evening or first thing in the morning. So you could be looking for those.
I guess just to build on what Michelle's saying, everything in there theoretically is open to some sort of comment on there. It's not like anything's been finalized at this point, right?
Exactly. Our intro piece kind of makes that point of going back to the schedule. We hope to get to what we think is a recommended draft by December, sometime in December, or thereafter, after people have had time to digest. Certainly if we get comments from any of the review bodies of things being off track, then that pushes that. But what you're getting certainly isn't the answer, and is not necessarily our formal recommendation of what to do, but we're getting closer. So I don't know that we discussed the update on this since we last met, but we had housing options and neighborhood design. There weren't too many technical committee issues that caused us to shift directions. So we're still looking at the options we've vetted with you all of, the R1 district, improving some opportunities through ADUs or small lot options. In the R2 districts, looking at making those small lot options a little more, I think, a basis of that district, whereas in the R1s, it would be kind of an alternative or in certain conditions, whereas in R2, it might be a basis of it, and also including some more small scale multi-unit projects. So things that maybe aren't so focused on the number of units, but are so focused on getting building scales that match the R2 district. So allowing some of those smaller lot patterns can perhaps relieve some of the development pressure, allowing more units, but keeping the building scale and lot sizes at a comparable scale to what's going on in those districts, and certainly not going up and above in most cases. And then the MUR typo there, I'm sorry, MUR3, trying to improve some of the small and moderate scale apartment districts. So that theme kind of made sense to the committee. The bottom 3 points are what usually came about on that. That was the part where some of the parking issues that different departments are dealing with were brought up, that they do exist and we need to be aware of them. Fire safety and access requirements are going to drive a lot of this. So there was some coordination on capacity of water lines, fire hydrants, and especially where density is going up. So making sure that's linked through the required improvements. And then also coordinating utility capacity and utility updates in association with more larger scale infill development. So those are some of the directions from the Committee on Housing. And then in general, the housing types and the design issues we discussed, most departments felt were primarily in community development. So not too many issues or concerns there. Then our last discussion, as I mentioned, was December 9th, and sustainability and general design. So we circled back to a lot of those chapters and discussed these topics. We presented the framework that we've been working with, that a lot of the sustainable issues you're dealing with at a larger scale. In other words, making things more walkable, bikeable, and transit supportive from just a pure development pattern issue is one of the most sustainable things you can do. So all those other topics we've been addressing are working there, from the streets and circulation. Improving multimodal access is an important part of that. So then we got down to the site and building issue, and making sure we're incorporating, it's the balance of a lot of things this committee's already discussed. It can be done with landscape, it can be done with renewable energy, it can be done with efficient buildings and building code issues. And it can be done with alternative access parking, bike parking, and EV parking. All of those things come into it. No single one of them is going to be the absolute right answer for every site. So we need to be balancing all of those things. There was a lot of discussion on that last bullet point, coordinating with other codes and outside initiatives. So a lot of the things that we've brought up here, specifically the idea of green roofs, and not necessarily green as in planted, but that idea of energy efficient roofs through coloring, design, materials, making sure that that's promoted, if not ultimately required by wherever the energy code and building code ends up through its updates. So we're kind of coordinating among different people on staff that are responsible for those efforts, and trying to get the code to land there. So there's not necessarily anything specific in there now on those types of things. It's sort of deferring to the building code, but we discussed that with the technical committee on if there's either incentives or some of the alternative compliance that staff is going to have through site plan review, making sure that energy performance and sustainability issues are one of those key criteria for exercising those decisions will be important.
Hey, Chris, we have a question. Is now
Yeah.
a good time, or do you want to get through?
Now is a great
another?
time. Yeah, it's a
Kate?
good time.
Okay, great. Kate Townley.
Question, I couldn't recall if we included this before as part of sustainability, but really calling out urban heat island and how different elements can help mitigate that. Whether it's, that and stormwater, but I'm just wondering if we're calling it out specifically because it's becoming more and more of an issue, and just to try and get ahead of it.
Yes, it's definitely called out in terms of some of the design objectives. So the other thing we're doing is you'll see in the code are the use of intent statements and design objectives, things that aren't regulatory, but that are, giving anywhere from 5 to 9 bullet points on what these standards and certain sections are trying to achieve. And so it certainly is called out there as one of the big objectives. It becomes a little more difficult to say any one standard addresses that, but I think the two things I would go to are streetscape standards, where we're trying to prioritize street trees that can cover a lot of that area that's hardscape on both the street or sidewalks. Trying to get over time a tree canopy, and then in the parking lot design as well. Roofs and buildings, we don't quite have that much covered. I think that's more of the previous issue I was talking about, but the standards themselves are trying to establish a baseline where that can be a benefit to reduce that urban heat island. And then the intent and design objectives certainly say that is one of the key objectives. So, and if you ever ran into a situation where one standard was competing against that, you could use the design objectives to evaluate that. Any other questions? Okay, the next one is just getting to the schedule and what you guys are all going to receive. As I think I've mentioned a few times, we know dumping drafts of development codes on you to especially in a compressed time frame isn't the most enjoyable thing. So there will be a companion document that's sort of the outline of how the code's organized, and then it goes into these section maps that will appear similar to what's shown here on the screen. So you'll be able to track down this column of how the new code is organized and what specific sections and subsections are. This column will refer to how the current code addresses it. So if you ever wanted to go back and look at how things are regulated now, because there may be things that are in there that either you may wonder why or may not agree with exactly, but they're current standards, and we're either trying to move the needle one way or another, or there are things that we've been said don't address that topic. So there might be things in there that that this column would be helpful for to learn about if you care to. And then the last one is where we do try to explain, okay, what's the key themes of the changes, why were we doing it, or if this is also where some of the areas where we're still waiting on direction or have a few options to lay out might be identified here. So hopefully that's helpful. It's not the most it starts out as my notes to myself internally, and then I go through and try to edit for you all. So it's not the most polished document by any means, but hopefully it provides a good bridge for you guys to figure out how much of these drafts you want to pour over and what things you just want to get a summary review of. With that, our overall schedule is to hit you all up with these key meetings going forward with the topics and chapters identified there, and then ideally getting them to you at least 10 days in advance, if not a couple weeks in advance. So again, these 4 chapters went to staff late this afternoon, so hopefully you could be getting them fairly soon. And then we're tracking with all the other articles to do the same, and you'll see a couple of them pop up multiple times. So when we get to housing and neighborhood design, access and parking and landscape design come up again because they're related to what we're trying to do with the zoning districts and uses and the development standards for residential design. The last thing I think there's, and maybe Brian or Nancy, that this last meeting date wasn't necessarily set due to holiday schedule and things like that. So I think there's certainly some flex in this schedule, but they also are trying to parallel these with work sessions with the council. So the council will be seeing these same articles shortly after you do in a staged setting. So with that, happy to answer any questions, and then we're probably thinking we get into some more discussion on what schedule works for you, particularly on that last meeting date that's hitting on a holiday.
Chris, are we going to be supporting you at those council working sessions, or is that something you just want our input beforehand? Looks like we're going to get through 2 of them before we start those working sessions. So will you be going back to the technical provision for that first working session for city council, et cetera?
Yeah, maybe that's a question for Brian. I know the council really appreciates and likes to hear your all's support of, or concerns or questions. So, however, I don't know that we thought far enough ahead of whether you all would have a role in those meetings. In my opinion, looking at the schedule, it's kind of daunting enough. We'd hate to tax you that much, but I haven't thought through it that much.
And I guess then, just to follow up, is your intent on that first council working session to go back to the technical provision? Like, are they having were there 4 mimic R4?
Oh, I see. Essentially, my thought is that they're going to be getting the same or similar things as you all receiving at the first meeting. I don't think we would be going through and editing and giving them a whole new package. It's more of just we at that 11/7 meeting, we would be able to identify any concerns, thoughts, or questions you all had on any of those sections.
Great.
Michelle?
Yes. Perhaps it's not obvious to all of you, but November 8th is election day, and there are some of us that have been helping candidates and might want to not meet on that day. I know this isn't a political group, but just a thought that maybe we do move that last meeting to the 29th so that instead of the 8th, we might be able to meet on the 15th. Just a thought, but
Where are the French books?
And I'm busy
Sorry,
on the
Christy.
8th. I'm busy on the 8th as well, because I think at the Sustainability Commission meeting, normally this is the first and the third Tuesday, right? But that one's the second Tuesday. Just making sure my date's right.
So usually we meet on the first and third Tuesdays, right? So the 4th and the 18th. So we meet after the Tuesday following the regular council meeting. So regular council
Right.
meeting is October 3rd and then October 17th. So you would meet on the 4th and the 18th following that schedule.
right.
But then for November,
November would be the 8th and the 22nd, correct?
but isn't the first Tuesday the first?
But
1/1,
it's not,
11/1?
but it's not, I mean, it doesn't have to stay this way, but following that thinking, the first Monday is on the 7th. So which would be the regular council meeting.
I see.
So, but that's up to you as the committee.
Or
Well, we can talk about it later, can't we?
is Chris frozen, or is he just oh no, there we go. Okay.
I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, am I frozen or what? So,
No, I think we can talk about it if y'all want to think about it and talk about it on the 4th.
yeah, that's fine.
We would just need
Sure.
enough time to make sure we get agendas posted in time and things like that. So
Yeah, I mean, I think generally speaking, avoiding election day is probably good, and then avoiding the week of Thanksgiving is probably good.
Yeah, that was my thought. Thanks, Colin.
Any other questions for Chris or Brian? I'm not seeing anything, guys. Chris, did you have any more? Did I lose Chris? Brian, did you have anything?
I didn't have anything. I think Chris was just on mute.
Yeah, I was
Oh,
on
okay.
mute. Yeah, I don't have anything.
Okay. Well, we appreciate everybody coming out, and we'll make sure, and I had to step out for a second earlier, but I don't know if, I know Chris touched on it. Our goal with all this is to try to get you the information out and far enough in advance that gives you time to review. So that's our end goal, is getting you guys the information and then being able to take any additional comments that you all have out of these initial drafts to council. That's kind of why they're working this way, because we have those study sessions scheduled. So we look forward to hitting that next step and starting to go through the drafts at the next meeting. And Planning and Zoning Commissioners, we'll see you here in another few minutes. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Thanks, all.
everyone. I'll get those
Bye.
sent out to you tonight.